Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Book Goodies podcast with authors. I'm your host, Deborah Carney, and I have with me a special guest today. His name is Damon. Damon, how are you?
I'm doing very well today, Deborah. Thanks.
Why don't you introduce yourself to the people, tell them who you are and what you do.
All right, my name is Damon Ferrell Marbut. I live and work in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I guess we're here today to discuss my debut novel release. It's a literary fiction coming-of-age novel called Awake in the Mad World. We can go in any direction you would like, Deborah. You're in control.
All right, well, why don't you tell people, before we get started talking about your current book, how did you get interested in writing? When did you start writing?
Okay, well, I started writing actually as a child. You know, when I've met a lot of people, especially in graduate school, I have a master's in creative writing and literature, so I know a lot of other writers. A lot of people say they wrote since they were a kid. That's all they've ever known. Mm-hmm. And at the risk of sounding kind of cliche, it's actually pretty true. Because I used to run around with folders and notepads with on me at all times. My godmother was the school librarian at one of the schools I went to, so I was, you know, some people would try to sneak out of class to go kind of goof off or sneak into the gym or something, and I was always hiding out in the library. And
nice.
And that kind of, you know, progressed into an adult behavior where I was, you know, even in business school for my undergrad degree, I was sneaking poems and short stories under the office doors of some of the English department professors. So,
oh, that must be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I was ignoring signs that I needed to be studying that all along. So when I finished business school, it was kind of the right move to walk into my master's in writing. And that first semester or two was a lot of catch up, but I kind of came into my own after that first year.
Okay, well, and it's really interesting because since I'm mostly a photographer and I have a son that did a lot of writing when he was young, and I have his books that I'm editing and putting out there for publication, because back when he was writing them, there weren't, you know, CreateSpace didn't exist, and
right.
Kindle and all that. And when I started telling people that I was publishing fiction books from my son and I was publishing photography books for myself, it's like all of a sudden all these people came out of the woodwork. And my grandson, who's 12, said he had some ideas for some books and he was going to write one. And when I put that out there in the internet and in person talking to people, all of a sudden people started telling me stories. Like another friend said, my 12-year-old came up to me before I left for this conference and said, "Hey, Dad, is it okay if I build an iPad application?" 12 years old. And he goes, "What do you need an iPhone application for?" And he goes, "Well, I'm working on a book." And he had never mentioned this to his dad before. And what it was is he was actually interviewing people they live in a very eclectic section of San Francisco. And he was interviewing people and talking about how they, you know, what their view of San Fran was, how, you know, how much they loved living there, what are things they had done while they had been there. And all of a sudden, like 4 or 5 other people all of a sudden popped up with, you know, I'd be on a Skype call with somebody and I'm on speaker and I'd say something about Alec writing a book, and in the background I'd hear a 12-year-old pop up and say, "Yeah, I'm writing a book too, Dad." And Dad would go, "What? Huh? Can you bring me this? Can I see it?" So a lot of, you know, like you said, a lot of people start young, but I think a lot of people get squashed when they're young and they, you know, oh, like you got to go do your homework instead. You know, right. That's just silliness over there. So
yeah, a lot of people give up before they even realize that they were putting in an effort in it too. You know, I was always encouraged by, you know, my teachers and my family, so it kind of stayed constant in my life. So I was kind of fortunate in that regard. It was, you know, my family would always say, "Oh, keep writing, don't ever stop, but make sure you're doing this other stuff too."
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the thing that I always knew that I had to hang on to. If we switched schools or if we moved to a different city through my dad's work or something, I always had that. So that was kind of a survival thing for me to kind of feel like I was staying focused as I was growing up. So, so yeah, I understand that completely.
And how much of the stuff you wrote when you were younger do you actually still base stories off of, or do you have it sitting somewhere that maybe you would finish it, or did you actually finish any of it and self-publish or publish it?
Oh, that's really an interesting question, I think, because I never really looked at myself, even as a kid, as though I were experiencing a childhood. I always kind of felt like an adult because so when I look back at my childhood, I just kind of think of places I lived and schools I went to. But I think I tried once in my second attempt at kind of a full-length novel in my first year of graduate school, but I ultimately ended up just realizing it was a practice in developing my craft, and it was a book I wasn't going to keep.
Right.
But I kind of did try to stretch back into my childhood, and it didn't work. It wasn't something that, maybe if I get pinned down and have to do a memoir one day or talk more about my childhood, that I could find something. But the stuff that I produced back then was, basically just kind of, I just look at it as exercises to, I wouldn't know what to do with it.
Yep, it was the raw stuff coming out, just letting you know that you were creative inside and letting you spew out the first stuff, do your free writing and everything before you hit the age where you actually hit to produce by writing or learn a process.
Oh, yeah, it was just a, creative, my childhood was really creative because my siblings and I would write plays and put them on for our parents, and so we were just kind of doing anything to just kind of live in our imaginations and share them together and with other people. So, yeah, I don't think I really started producing anything that I thought was that could be shared on a more universal level until probably graduate school. So, okay,
all right. Now, take us back to your current project. Tell us about that book and what it's about.
Okay, Awake in the Mad World is it is
hard to explain.
The first book I chose to kind of set the tone for my authorship. I realized it had the most important value to me as a writer. So it's about a group of postgraduate friends that are kind of struggling to figure themselves out. When they first experience that jolt of leaving college for whatever the real world is to them, and they kind of seem to have a hard time seeing it as welcoming. So it's about maintaining your friendships and learning how to maintain also that spark and that spirit of faith and your own abilities as they're developing, and it's interesting, I think, because it was really realistic, an interpretation of what my friends went through in graduate school. And, there was this constant debate going on about, do we go on to more graduate school, or do we go out into the real world and just find, a job that allows us to still write? So it's the book, the main characters of the book are all developing writers, and they're not all the time, but they do engage memorably enough in these athletic philosophical conversations that are about a world that they only kind of seem to understand in their secret language. So it's about friendship for sure, but it's definitely a coming of age story about discovering yourself, and yeah, I'm really proud of the message that it presents to the reader. It wasn't my intention when I was writing it. I more or less was just trying to stay true to my commitment with the characters, and that turned out to be something I'm very proud of.
Nice. And when you first started it, did you have like a whole outline in your head, or did you say, this is what I want to write about, we'll see what happens?
Actually, I was working on another book at the time, and I just started writing this just as kind of an exercise, like we were discussing earlier. And I got maybe a third of what the book is now finished, and then I didn't touch it again for about 3 years or so. And I found it just scrolling through some files on my laptop and started reading it when I had a couple of days off from work, and fell in love with the characters and the energy of the book, and realized that I wanted to take it on seriously. And I actually quit a job so I could I could work. I took a job as a full-time night auditor at a hotel, so I could have access to their printers and a lot of downtime, and actually get drafts of it produced so I could edit them by hand. And
nice.
So I took a big pay cut from a management job that I had to be able to finish the book.
And it paid off in the end, or is it still in process?
Yeah, it certainly did pay off. I think so.
Okay, great. Well, and that's important to know, because a lot of people start part-time, and then there are a lot of those aha moments where you realize you either have to commit to doing this or you have to give it up because it's taking over. And, you need to get the story out. And if you can't do that part-time without destroying your family, because between work and writing, they never get to see you.
Right.
You come to the realization that you need to put some more time into this and, take a hiatus from the job that you weren't meant to do long term anyway.
Right. And if the creative work you're doing is important enough to you and you do see it as work, then the people around you that love you will support that and see it as work as well. And you can learn to make time for it. I've been really fortunate because, my friends and family have always just kind of gotten out of the way of that. And, they knew since I was a kid that I was always that type of person that liked to stay a little removed from the group so I could kind of observe everything that was going on. So I've been very fortunate in that regard.
Well, and there's another good point that you bring up. A lot of writers are very good people watchers. They're very good at observing situations and then translating them into book form, whether it's a fantasy or whether it's a novel that is supposed to depict, modern times, or whether they put the characters back in, medieval times. You
right.
get a lot from people. I've always told people, I've started to tell people that if you ever have a mental block or a writer's block, come to New York City, get on the subway, and just ride around for a while.
Yeah, New York certainly got a lot of characters.
You will see enough characters and enough interesting things that will stock you full of stories for the next 10 years. So
that's completely true. And if you find the right environment, regardless of the city you're in, you don't have to make anything up. You just need to write it truthfully and write it well. So that's a good point.
Yeah, just sit down in a park. I'm fortunate to live close enough to Manhattan that, if I ever did hit a dry spell, all I would have to do is go sit in Central Park and just watch people.
Yeah.
You could
just walk outside, yeah.
We went to a Central Park on a Wednesday, and in the course of 5 minutes, we saw 2 wedding parties walk by. There was a guy playing the saxophone in a tunnel. All kinds of stuff going on. And
we get a lot of that in New Orleans too.
Of course.
Everyday occurrence.
You're surrounded by the musicians, and it's a city that supports creativity very well because you've got music and you've got writing and you've got writers and that do readings. And do you do a lot of readings of your books? I know you said before we started talking that you were hoping to try to do some.
Yeah, I live uptown near Tulane University and Audubon Park and the zoo, and we have some really, really cool little independent bookstores, and there's some more in the Lower Garden District as well. I've actually, since I was in Atlanta for most of June, and I came back and I visited some of the stores, so I'm waiting for a couple of them to finish reading the copies I dropped off, and we'll go from there, because we have the semester about to start back up at Tulane, so I think it'd be nice to have an event like that for students.
Yeah, to kind of get their energy level up, to see someone that went through the program and, succeed, is now succeeding to be able to.
Right, and that's the focus of my blog as well, because I'm trying to reach out to more specifically, it's even referred to as a writer's workshop online, but I'm reaching out to young authors and young writers, trying to enter that conversation about writing and publishing, and because publishing now is not what it was when I was growing up, and it took me a while to get to the point where I could get over that hump because I was so in love with that traditional publishing model of the past that now I'm fully engaged in the new publishing world, and my blog is kind of hoping to reach out to students and like grad students and undergrads and people that are just in their their first stages of learning how to put their work out there, to kind of have a dialogue about it, because I do feel like I am a resource right now for all the work that I've been putting into it as well.
So you're indie publishing, or you went with a small publishing house? I don't remember.
I actually published through CreateSpace.
Oh, okay, perfect. So
yeah, I did have a few small presses that were reading the book, but I talked to an old college professor of mine who lives in California, and another professor who's an editor of mine based out of New York City, and they were kind of pushing me toward the self-publishing idea, and I've been fighting it for the last few years, but once I got a decline from one of the presses I was really waiting for, I went ahead with CreateSpace, and it's actually turned out to be best for me because I am the type of person, when it comes to creative projects, I end up being largely in control anyway.
Yep.
And so it worked out great. I got everything that I wanted out of the process, but it took a lot of prep time and a lot of paying attention to deadlines and research.
So basically, you set yourself up on a schedule as if you were a publisher that was going to publish your work, and you just ended up being your own publisher, which is really cool. Yeah,
it was start to finish from I guess the moment I realized that I was going to start investigating my options if this press said no. I think it took me about 4 months. The first 2 months, I was driving everybody crazy at the house because all I was doing was staying on the computer, and anybody that walked past me, I was telling them what I newly discovered about something.
Right.
And I kind of got over that hump, and then when I went to Atlanta to spend time with my family, the book was releasing at the same time, so I managed to get my last bout of obsession kind of out of the way. So by the time I came back to New Orleans, I was the Damon that they all kind of recognized prior to the process starting months earlier.
Okay, so what was like one of the aha moments that had you realize, other than being turned down by that one small publisher, what was your determining factor before that press answered you?
Well, I guess the more I learned about the marketing aspects of the book and the initial cost of getting what I perceive to be a quality product out. So I think my aha moment, I suppose, was when I stopped seeing what I was doing from the perspective of a writer, because I finished the book 3 years ago, and I think once I got into that comfortable position where I was prepared to start being more the businessman and the whole transition away from being the creator into the marketer, I think things got a lot more exciting, because I think part of why I was so reluctant to get involved in a self-publishing field was I felt like I was going to have to step away from that emotional and psychological connection you have to your work. Like, you just want to create and send away, and somebody says, oh, we love it, and now we want to produce it for you. And that model doesn't exist anymore. And, like I said earlier, my book is, a coming-of-age literary fiction novel, and it's not a conventional novel in structure, and my characters are not conventional, and they don't discuss things that most people discuss in modern literature, which does create uniqueness that I think is nice. But at the same time, I understand that it's going to be a risk for someone at a publishing company to pick up a debut novelist who's not writing something they can slam dunk.
Right. You didn't fit the formula. So
right, and I've never fit the formula, so I don't know why it took me so long to get to the point where I produced it myself. But at the end of the day, I wanted people. I didn't want to dazzle somebody with, a pretty cover or some stellar write-up on the back. I wanted it to be an accessible book that tells you exactly what you're getting, and it does matter to me that somebody is going to spend, $14.99 for a paperback or even $5 for the Kindle.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't price either of them to, or actually Nook or iBook either. It's all $5 across the board. But I didn't want anybody to feel like they were spending money on something that they ultimately regretted purchasing. I want this to be something they connect with.
Right.
So that was first and foremost my concern, and still is. So, when I get positive reviews, I'm happy. That's nice that people are responding well to it. But I can't put a lot of emphasis on those. Just like, sometimes people aren't going to respond well to it, and they might have a negative reaction to it.
Right.
The reviews don't matter to me as much as, people's actual experience of it.
Exactly.
If that makes any sense.
No, totally, because it's the same thing with me. Daniel has, my son has a couple of books that are, people are either going to hate them or love them. And what you as a writer want to do is evoke an emotion. If they're just like, when they're done reading it, you didn't do your job. But if they're, oh my God, this is a great book, or oh my God, I hated this, you've evoked an emotion in them, and that was your point. And even the people who didn't like it took something away from it if they dislike it that much.
No, that's absolutely true. And you think about these bestsellers that, what you see on their book is there's 1 million copies in print. Well, the book's probably been out 20 or 30 years, and if a million copies sold, there could have been 5 million people that came across the book and absolutely hated it and threw it across the room. So, that is the gamble you take when you make yourself a public figure. And I recently read on somebody mentioned something that I was discussing with another writer on Goodreads. And she said she was feeling a little depressed because she had overlooked a lot of stuff in her manuscripts, and she got friends to help edit it, and then she published it, and then it just got chewed to pieces. Mm-hmm. And it's just going to happen. I've had really good reviews of the book, and I've had one negative, and the one negative that I did have was horrible. It was absolutely scathing, but it was the reviewer just didn't see what I was trying to do with the book, and
right.
What I saw as a misinterpretation was, they interpreted it their way and then tore it up for that misinterpretation, mm-hmm. And it turned out to be a really great thing because it kind of forced me into a different type of dialogue about what the work means itself. So, a negative review is not a bad thing at all. It's your reaction to it is probably the worst part.
Right. If it helps you to either redefine, or it helps you to understand that they got the point but they didn't like the point, those are all things you can take away. And everybody knows that right now the hot thing is 50 Shades of Grey. I won't touch it. I won't look. There's stuff in it that I'm just not interested in, and it's not that it's an explicit novel, but it's that it's in the wrong way, but I'm
excited that, there's a huge conversation in the country about a book rather than, celebrity gossip or something, but it's not the type of writing for me at the end of the day. You could, take Lolita by Nabokov. That's about, this man had this, what we perceive to be an incredibly unhealthy relationship and lusting after this young woman, but he did it so beautifully that it's believable and accessible. So, it's just the type of writing and that type of book just that you mentioned is just not something that appeals to me. So you never know what's going to be popular.
Yeah. J.K. Rowling didn't know that Harry Potter was going to blow up. She wrote a nice novel. And, she had a series in her head as an idea, and she didn't know that, all of a sudden her characters were going to become worldwide heroes. And, it's just, you
want to talk about sacrifice too. She definitely, she struggled to be able to, take care of her own family and still produce that. So, you do have those stories out there that are incredibly motivational.
Yeah. Nobody told Stephen King that this is what you should write.
Right.
You know, what came out
of his... A lot of people that publish their own books, too. You know, their first ones. I'm not comparing myself to John Grisham, but, you know, he's sold millions and millions of copies, and I think A Time to Kill was his first, and he published that himself.
Yep.
So, it's just, you know, the publishing world can be incredibly unforgiving, but, and I was telling somebody this recently, at some point, you know, if you do put your work out there and it appeals to enough people, then somebody in the industry will say, okay, well, maybe this is a trend. This is a sign that something is changing in literature, or this type of writing is
becoming popular.
You know, deserves a little credence. Yeah.
Yep. Well, and a lot of it too is accessibility. Like your book is in print, or your book is in print at CreateSpace. Do you have it available on the Kindle?
Yeah, it's available with Nook, Kindle, Apple iBookstore, Kobo, and the Diesel Bookstore, and it's still waiting to be put on the Sony ebook site as well. Okay,
cool. So, because I have a little story about a friend of mine that he published a book of classic car photos on the Kindle, and he has a whole website, you know, that this is associated with. You know, the website's been established for a long time, and the website has an older readership, and people would email him and say, you know, I would buy your book if it was in print, but I don't know what a Kindle is. And he put the book up on CreateSpace. We got the proof, we approved it, and it went live, and he sent out a newsletter, and it immediately started selling because he had a built-in audience, and he knew how they wanted to consume their material. So I'm thinking that authors that are limiting themselves to either print or ebook and saying, I'll never do the other, they need to take a step back and see that they need to make their book available in whatever version the consumers want to consume it in.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly unfair to limit somebody's options when they're interested in what you're doing, but you know, their resources might be different from yours. Yeah, I was planning on doing the ebooks starting that, I think, right around the same time as the print. And I talked to a friend of mine who's a musician in California, and just from one conversation with him, I decided to go ahead and start the ebooks first, just because the print was naturally going to take a little bit longer to release.
Right.
And that just became a timing issue in that regard. But yeah, you want people to have access to your work, not because it's necessarily about money. Well, for me, it's not. I really think it's an important story. And my sister, actually, she's in real estate in Atlanta, and she's a very business-minded woman, and she said, well, why are you making your ebook only $4.99? I don't want you to sell yourself short. I said, well, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to make it 99 cents because then people are going to read it because it's cheap, and I'm not going to make it $12.99 because I don't want, you know, I'm not going to charge somebody for $13 for a download. I want it to be something that's reasonable. So you have to pay attention to all that. But the guy you mentioned was pretty fortunate because he had that built-in market with the cars. A lot of authors can't say they've got that to look forward to before they produce a book.
Now, here's a question that I've been asking a lot of authors. Did you build an online platform for your book before you released it, or are you backpedaling and doing that now? Or, well, because you said the book was finished 3 years ago. So while you were going through the process of getting it published, self-published, did you start building an online platform, or did you have to wait until everything was in place first?
I waited until I got a better view of the timing for everything to start coming out.
Okay.
So I think about a month prior to, I had never even joined Facebook because I never really liked being that connected with people. And as the book was starting to come out, I joined Goodreads and I joined Facebook, and then I started up a dialogue about it. But I know a lot. I've lived all over the country, so I have friends in every corner of America, and and I kind of knew once I connected those dots and everything that the dialogue would start up. The big leap for me was actually starting the blog and kind of learning what kind of content to put on there, and because I don't like I know there's a necessary element to promoting your own work, but I didn't want to have just a website that pushes my book out in front of people. I wanted it to serve another purpose. So I kind of started my blog reaching out to developing writers and kind of have a page for the book itself too. I didn't want to try to sell books from my website and do all that. I'm not that interested in myself.
No, I hear you, and that's where this podcast grew out of. I've got 25 books over on the Kindle, and about half of them are available in print. And my point, I like selling books, but my point is that other people can do this too. And they just need to learn how, and they need to get over the hurdles. And by doing interviews with folks like you that did all the hard work, and your challenge was that you finished the book 3 years ago. And in the last year and a half is when all of the, let's just say, that's when everything hit the fan, So 3 years ago, you still wanted to be traditionally published because that was the only viable option in your eyes. And as the ebook world came up, at first all ebooks were scammy, they were garbage, they were crappy, and then all of a sudden the bigger authors caught on, or Amazon and Sony and the Nook, they all, Barnes and Noble, they all decided that, make my work available on there if all it takes is a little reformatting. I mean, it's a novel after all. It isn't you're just reading it without paper. And then the whole green thing, let's not waste a lot of paper on books. And then people realize that, the portability, I can take my entire library with me to the beach or the doctor's office, and I don't have to worry about, taking my whole big book here just to read the last chapter while I'm at the doctor's office, and now I still have to lug it around and take it home, and and then on the other side of the coin, when you have the book available in both formats, if someone reads a book and they like it enough that they want to buy it to have it around, they have that option and they can. So there's a lot of people that when I released my ebooks, they were like, but I want real print books, and I said, well, I haven't gotten there yet. And it only took me a couple months to figure out the whole CreateSpace thing with being a photographer. My books were going to be mostly photographs, and color used to cost a lot to print, so
there's a higher cost there for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, you can get it as an ebook for $5.99, or you can pay $20 for a print book. And Amazon allows you to show both versions on one page. So when the print books started selling, I'm actually kind of hoping it was people that read it as an ebook first, and then they decided they wanted the print copy.
Right.
So, because they loved it so much. But, we don't get to see into that's the only problem, is we don't get to see who our customers are. That's the one downside of it. But that's with any publishing across the board. So...
yeah, that's something that's very important to me to maintain as long as I can. I'm hoping I can always be accessible to people that want to send me emails or comments through the blog. Because there were plenty of times when I was in graduate school where and friends of mine as well, we would try to contact other professors who at colleges who had written books that we loved and other writers, and there was just this wall between you and the artist that you love, and I understand that at some point they have to cut you off because they
need
time. They have to hire somebody to answer all these emails. But I really do want to participate in the community as much as I can. So my blog kind of does that too. I want to hear about other people's projects and the things they're trying to do. And if I can use my book as largely the machine that kind of makes that happen, then I'm happy that my book serves more than just the one purpose.
Yeah, that's awesome. Your book will help start the conversation for other people to talk about what they've been dreaming about or wanting to do. I'm noticing a lot more of my friends are registering domains that I can tell are going to be for books in the future. So I'm mostly in the internet marketing business, and that's my so-called day job. And a lot of those folks, they'll come up to me and say, "Yeah, I want to write the great American novel," and I'm like, "You? Really?"
Yeah, I would love to know what that is these days.
Yeah,
whatever that means.
Well, and like some friends of ours have published some books that are compilations of articles that have been written through the years for an industry magazine, or that have put together cookbooks, or have put together some interesting other books about success stories, and not necessarily within our industry specifically, but in general. And I think that there's one needed for authors, because in the past there's so much. There's been so much control from the top, One of my friends has been traditionally published and self-published is like, "I'll never be traditionally published again," he said.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that also.
They're like, "They didn't let me title the book I wanted the way I wanted it to. I didn't like the book cover they chose. I didn't like the way they edited it." And then the distribution that you thought was going to happen, they said, "Oh, we'll put it in all the bookstores." They put one copy in like every other store, and it was really
when they do all that, I know it's from their marketing perspective, but they're redefining you as an author as a product that you cannot be. So if you try to step into the role of being that type of image that they're presenting for you, can't do it. It's got to be yours, and that's why I think the smaller presses do really, really good work still. So that's why I started small. When I sent out some query letters and a couple of manuscript samples, I wanted to have an intimate relationship with my editor, with my publisher, and that's the whole issue of control is something that used to frustrate me and kind of turn me off from putting out a book that I think is really important to the American conversation right now about people trying to identify themselves, and the type of work they're doing and the type of person they're trying to develop as in a world that's kind of seemingly indifferent to them. And but yeah, I thought this book was important 3.5 years ago, and it took me this long to get to the point to where I publish it because of exactly what you're talking about.
Yep. And now if you write when you write your next book, you'll be able to publish it as quickly as you want to. You're not waiting on someone else's timeline.
And I'm about halfway done with I think I'm at the halfway mark of the one I'm writing now that's based here in New Orleans. And I don't see that, really, I'm not hurrying to finish the draft. So if it takes, a year or so for it to get to where I want to produce it, I'll have had time to kind of talk about Awaken the Mad World and kind of have a readership. So I think it does get easier over time. You just can't stop. You can't get disheartened and then just quit after a first attempt. Yeah.
And the only other thing that people really need to realize about traditional publishing versus indie publishing is that they think that the publishing house is going to do a lot of marketing for them. And
they do so little.
Yeah, even a small press can only do so much. And
I think they do enough to kind of justify having published the book, and then you're on your own, but they don't really tell you that you're on your own part. They just kind of
all of a sudden they just stop taking your phone calls, and you're like, "Okay, what did we sell?" And they're like, "Yeah, we're done. We're on to the next project." So at least in this way, if you have to market yourself anyway. And again, it's kind of like reinventing an industry and inventing new jobs. There are a lot of now independent editors. Instead of an editor working for a publishing house, editors can, find people that they want to work with, that they're a good fit for. And, they don't have to worry about making books fit a certain formula or be dictated to about how they have to edit a specific book. Instead, it's you working with an editor and molding the book together. And, so there's a whole new industry that is providing all new jobs, especially for people that want to work from home. You can be an editor. It doesn't matter where you are. You just need a computer. You don't even need internet when you're editing. So, and then there are people that can design awesome book covers that, would never get inside the door of a publishing house. And there's a lot more creativity and a lot more freedom because the gatekeepers aren't in charge anymore.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think the whole publishing industry, as we once knew it, has just kind of allowed itself to be squeezed by all this technology, and they're kind of hanging on to what they know to work just to kind of stay relevant. But a lot of the companies are doing really smart stuff too. They're diversifying, and agents are acting as publishers also, and
right.
I think it's still pretty cutthroat. It kind of has to be because it's so competitive. But that's why you have people like me that are relatively unknown and have what I think to be a pretty big voice that's developing. We all have a shot. We just have to kind of stick with it and keep having these types of conversations.
Yep, exactly. Again, to go back to J.K. Rowling, she didn't know she was going to be rich and famous. She just wrote a book. And she really believed in the book. And,
right.
And when you think about it, a lot of people get caught up in it's too late. I can't make any money doing this. Just look at the people that were not famous 5 years ago. Whether it's musicians or whether it's, a young musician, an old musician, whether it's a writer. Judith Krantz didn't start writing until she was 55, and, her books were spectacular. And, it's just, you do it when you can do it. And now, I've been talking to a lot of authors that their book is based on something contemporary, a contemporary conversation. And if they waited for a year for a publishing house to get through their process, it might not be relevant anymore.
Yeah, and that was part of the that was much of the impetus for me to start putting myself in gear and doing that. That's exactly why I kind of started hurrying. And yeah, that's something I actually wrote about on my blog. Is just relevance in general. And I think to kind of touch on something else you just said, when you were talking about people kind of throwing in a towel on it, there is a real difference between knowing it's going to be a struggle and actually experiencing the struggle. The struggle is as unpleasant as people tell you it is. The frustration is very real, but when you're actually experiencing it, it's like when, like for New Orleans, as an example, when people say, "Oh, come down here in the summer," it's really, really uncomfortably hot. People are like, "Oh, I'm used to it being hot." And then you come down here and then you complain about the heat. Yeah. It's as hot as we tell you it's going to be in the summer. And it's the same thing with the publishing industry. You have to know that it's going to be frustrating, but that's not something that should deter you. I have a friend who's actually going to be on a big television show, actually has been on, and is continuing to move forward with this. It's a competition, and he knows that it's frustrating, and they try to stress you out. The production team is trying to force you to have some sort of outburst so they can get some good video of somebody's meltdown on camera. And I think that's a real strength, is when something's going to be tough, then you're prepared for it. You can't accurately predict the brand of toughness and adversity, but it's going to be tough, so So you really don't have a reason to quit unless you just get scared or you stop having faith in yourself, you know?
I just realized it's like having your first baby. You know at the end it's going to be really hard, but you don't know what it's going to be like until you go through it, and you can't explain it to your partner or your husband or whatever. And then, But in the end, you have a beautiful bundle that, then you nourish and you grow and all that.
Absolutely, yeah. You can read all the books you want, but once you have the baby, things still change.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that has to be nurtured and cultivated after you have it, too. Yeah. That's a completely applicable metaphor.
Yeah. All right. So if we had someone who was just starting out, which a lot of our listeners are, what would be the one thing you would tell them along their journey?
Well, I know a lot of people say write and read as much as possible. So with that as an apparent foundation,
okay.
I firmly believe that if you are kind and you dream big, then you will accomplish more than you ever expected otherwise. I think if you're kind to everyone involved in the process of, not being nice to people hoping that you're going to get some, positive result.
Right.
Encourage a generosity from them. But just, I think when you grow as a person, your work grows too, because you're allowing yourself to take in more stuff that you're not closing yourself off from. And that also includes, not thinking that you have a set way of doing things that's going to work forever. My process changes, and sometimes it takes me a while to notice that how I write and when I want to work changes, but it's just you just don't know any of it. But the one thing you can count on is if you are kind to people and you have the right goals and the right dreams, then you are going to accomplish more. You will grow as a person and you will grow as an artist. So that's really my honest take on it.
I love it. That was absolutely perfect. And with that, we're just about out of time. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, and hopefully we can get you on another podcast later on down the line and maybe cover a specific topic that you'd like to talk about in the future directly to aspiring authors or established ones that are frustrated.
Sure. There's always room for that kind of talk, for sure.
Well, yeah, and again, like I've said, the reason I like to do podcasts is because it's the back and forth that brings out ideas and conversation. It's not a one-way conversation. It's a two-way or more conversation that really gets into people's heads and make them think. Why don't you let people know where they can find you on the internet? A lot of our people listen via podcatchers, and they may not go to the show notes. So if we can give them some places they can find you, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah. The name of the novel is Awake in the Mad World, and you could Google that, and I'm sure my blog would pop up as a link. But if not, you could also go to my blog, which is my full name, Damon Ferrell Marbut, and it's Damon, Ferrell as in Will Ferrell, Ferrell. Last name is Marbut, Marbut. So it's DamonFerrellMarbut.com, or just Google Awake in the Mad World. And I'm incredibly accessible through my blog. You can just post comments or email me through I think it's listed on the bio page and probably another page on there too. Okay. And I also do book reviews from the blog. So if you wanted to send a request, I've got details on what type of stuff that I look for a review.
Okay.
So
awesome.
Use me as a resource. Yeah.
Awesome. And as always, our listeners can find us at BookGoodies.com, where you can find this podcast and, get the links that you can just click on. And also you can leave comments on the blog if you'd like. And You can find us at twitter.com/BookGoodies, facebook.com/BookGoodies, and you can find me personally at twitter.com/Loxley, LOXLY. And we do have a contact form on BookGoodies if you want to be on one of our podcasts, or if you want to submit your book information to be listed on our website. It's completely free. And I want to thank everybody for listening, and I want to thank Geekcast.fm for hosting our podcast and many other podcasts on internet marketing and just marketing in general. So thanks everyone for listening. Everybody take out your pen and get writing, and have a great day.